Welcome to the Mark Winsor Show, a special edition with Nancy Fleming and her show, Money and Motivation. Nancy, I'm grateful to do a show with you.
Oh, it's great, Mark. It's been a while. It'll be super.
Hey, you're out of town, huh?
I am. Wouldn't you be if you could be?
Oh yeah, I tell you what, this heat is just wears me out by the time I get in August.
Oh yeah, it's only about 80 degrees here, so I'm handling it just fine.
Hey, we've got some wonderful events coming up. Have we chosen our final dates for our seminars yet?
We have two workshops coming up. One is on September 19th, which is Wednesday, at 6 o'clock at the Landmark Restaurant.
Oh, at the Landmark. Oh,
Landmark in Mesa, right?
I didn't know that. I love the Landmark.
Right, and then we have one on the 27th at 6 o'clock, also at the Landmark Restaurant. Yeah, it's a really nice place. Lots of good food choices and lots of just really good food and good information.
All right, so if any listeners want to attend in Mesa, September 19th or September 27th at the Landmark, go ahead and give Nancy Fleming or me, Mark Winsor, a call, and we'll get you linked up for that. All my contact information you can get at kqcklive.com at the radio station. And Nancy, yours is probably there as well. But if they want to RSVP, what's the best way for them to RSVP?
Yes, they can call my office, 480-632-8770 to RSVP. And we do have a KQCK Facebook page also, as well as the website.
All right, so I've got a very stressed out program director here, but he'll be okay. We had Matt Salmon on the line and lost him somehow, but we're waiting for Matt to call back, and I'm sure he will in a few minutes. Last week we had a wonderful show with Kirk Adams, and Kirk and Matt are running against each other for the Republican ticket for the United States House of Representatives, for the United States Congress. And both very conservative, both have some great ideas, and I'm looking forward to talking to Matt and asking him some nice hard questions as well. And Nancy, you're telling me, and actually it was not you. I was just on the phone with somebody, and I said, "You're going to listen to our show to make your final decision." She said, I already made my final decision. But I think, Nancy, you're kind of using these shows to help you make a decision as well, right?
I am using the show to help make a decision, especially because so many people are in agreement that we have two very good candidates, unlike so many elections where we hear the lesser of two evils. In my neighborhood, I have neighbors with signs for both candidates, and so I'm getting a lot of information from a lot of sources.
So they're wondering on your street. So when you're saying signs, not in your yard. You don't have both Matt Salmon and Kirk
in my yard. No, it's people on, 2 or 3 streets away from me, down from me. As I drive around, I see one, then I see another one. My father lives in my neighborhood, and so my neighborhood's pretty interested in everything that goes on.
Oh, I thought you meant in your yard, and I thought, man, that's odd. But no,
my
just
yard.
in your...
That would be really confusing, wouldn't it? To see two signs up there.
Oh, that would be just very, very interesting. Hey, one of the things that I was kind of researching, Nancy, is what to expect with the estate planning, with the estate tax. And, man, that just looks like it's up in the air.
It is 100% up in the air, and it has been every, last year, too, where we're thinking, okay, when this thing expires, what are they going to do? It is making a lot of the estate planning on my side of it difficult. We have to guess, and we have to hope, and you can only plan for how it is today because we cannot predict the future at all. It is. It's just really bizarre right now. It's why a government leaves us so up in the air with what they're planning to do just boggles my mind, because we don't have, at least not many of us have billions to work with that we can be making a lot of mistakes and end up paying more taxes or doing things that are not going to benefit us.
No, it seems like if anybody has any estate of any size, they should not die in 2013.
Yes, the perfect year for dying has already passed us. But not just in dying. We've got people trying, and planners. I just researched my own article about a Roth IRA conversion and the convoluted ways planners are saying, well, you could do this. You could convert your Roth this year and wait for the tax code. And if you convert too much, you have until October 15th of 2013. You can unconvert it, some of it or all of it. That's how up in the air it is, that people are trying so hard to just hedge themselves against an unknown tax future as much as possible.
Yeah, and it is hard for a financial planner as yourself or an attorney like me. In fact, I had a client in today, Nancy, and as we were talking about his trust, we were just finalizing his trust plan and his estate planning, and then I had to say, I might have to send you a letter or contact you in a few months when we hit January, because depending on what happens in the election and depending on what happens in Congress, I may have to change some of the provisions in your trust. It's that much up in the air,
Yes, and that's always, people just don't like that, to set something up and they think they've got it handled, and then you have to go back and do something different. And it's only been that way just recently. I've been doing this a long time, and just these last few years we've just had this total uncertainty about what's going on. In fact, I had a client that got in touch with me a week or so ago, and he's 71 now, and we kind of talked about this happening right now, so kind of reminded him about it. But he's a little bit higher on income than some, in that he has a pension plus his Social Security plus muni bond income. So once he started his distributions from his IRA, he started to have the tax surprises that we've been talking about, which is what makes planning so important. One thing being that he says my muni bond income counts against my Medicare premium, and it counts against my tax on Social Security. Well, now he says I started my distributions from my IRA, and he said the first year wasn't so horrible. He said I pushed up against the alternative minimum tax. Well, that happens when people's income goes up a little bit, but it's not indexed for inflation. We're anticipating more and more people will have this happen. So he said it was a few $100s, but his Medicare premium is now double what most people pay, and he doesn't get more benefits. He's just in an HMO everybody would recognize, a real common one. And then he says, but last year, now my taxes increased by close to $4,000, he said, because of pushing up into the alternative minimum tax, the muni bond income counting towards his tax on Social Security and his Medicare premium. Quite frankly, with the state of the muni bonds anymore, you'd think they would be doing people a favor to go into them. We've just gotten such bad news from so many of the municipalities. But that's what we're seeing, and that's what's making planning so difficult.
Now, municipal bonds, they don't typically get a lot of interest and a lot of return, but do they ever lose money?
Oh, yeah. When they default, we've had municipalities default, most recently in California. So if they default, yeah, you can...
And there's no insurance backing them or anything? It's just gone, huh?
It just depends. Some bonds will have insurance and some bonds won't. You have to check with your bond broker on that one. But they can default in the sense of not paying dividends anymore, so they can pull back and not do that. So it's just kind of like anything else. It used to be munis were a sure thing. Nothing's a sure thing anymore. You just have to do your research and be so careful.
So when you're talking to people about where they should be investing right now, what are you telling them?
It depends on each person. What's really interesting is we have more and more people who are trying to invest for income. And when they go to invest for income, there's a couple of different ways to do it. A lot of studies that have been done still say that you can invest in the traditional way people always have with stocks and bonds, and set it up and monitor it and probably pull out enough money to last your own whole life and be successful. But those studies mean by being successful, you don't run out of money, meaning if you die with $10, you were successful. Well, a lot of people don't, in the real world, think that if they have a large account and they die with $10, that they have been successful. I don't see people defining it that way. And so a lot of people then will go into who want to ensure that they're going to have money the rest of their life. They're going to go ahead and go into the annuity side of it, where they're going to be able to receive guaranteed income streams as a base. And then if they choose to invest or not. But we have people who are avid investors out there, and we have people who will not invest no matter what. They want all of their money guaranteed. And then there's people in between. So you can't make a hard and fast recommendation. What we can do is say, okay, where are you today? What are your goals and objectives? How much money do you need today, tomorrow, inflation adjusted? And I like to work with the pools of money and to create increasing income streams. So we may have one now, another one starting in 5 years out, 10 years out, so that people have an idea, if not a predictable way of knowing where they're going to be at a future time, instead of a hope and a guess and a maybe, and, well, if the market does okay, which is, again, another way that it will work, but we find that it's not working 100% of the time in any of the recent studies that have been done. It has to be watched really carefully. It ranges from anywhere from 75% on up, success rate. And a lot of people, and sometimes lower, a lot of people just don't like that, and we're finding that the first year or two in retirement often is a deciding factor. If I retire in the beginning of 2008, I am in a world of hurt.
Right.
You know, it's just what they call the way that returns are paid out.
Hey, listeners, we're still trying very as much as we can to get a hold of Matt Salmon. We can't get through to him. If we are unable to get through to him, we will reschedule a time and make sure the word gets out, but we're doing all we can to get through to him. We know he's out there because we had him on the line just as we were kicking the show off and somehow lost him. So we don't know if he's in a bad area or what the deal is. Or an emergency maybe, we don't know, but we'll get a hold of him. I know that the first time I met Matt Salmon, he went to the same high school that I went to and graduated 2 years before I graduated, and so a number of years later we had a a cappella reunion honoring the a cappella choir director, and I was on that committee, and Matt Salmon was helping on that committee as well, and that's when I met Matt. So I've been following his political career, and was excited to have him on tonight. So we'll definitely get him back if we're unable to get him now. But hang in there, don't change your station yet, and we'll see if we can still get him. Hey, Nancy, do you still meet with clients who believe that all they need is Social Security for their retirement?
I don't think anybody believes that anymore for a lot of reasons. Mostly it's difficult to live 100% off of a Social Security check, and we just have a lot of people really nervous about Social Security. I've been doing quite a bit of research into it because there's such conflicting reports, but I've had somebody post on Facebook this really kind of angry post about Social Security is not an entitlement. We paid into it. Social Security isn't broke. Well, I've had clients come in and tell me that their most recent check, this was probably a couple of months ago, has been, in fact, retitled. And when they receive their check, they're receiving something that says entitlement on it. And people do not like that. And it goes back to a matter of trust. Social Security was set up to be a trust fund. We pay into it for many years, and the understanding and the agreed upon contract is that then when we retire, we have these specified payments that we can receive. Social Security is convoluted. I'll get to that in a second. But what we're seeing here is that when the law was passed, it went ahead and allowed Congress complete control over it. So Congress can revoke it, or Congress can change it. Congress can do it. It was not, again, what we're seeing is what's the rhetoric of what is said out there often is not the same as what's written in the law, and that's how Social Security was written up many years ago.
On the way out here, Nancy, I was listening to an interview with Paul Ryan, and he was explaining how Obamacare has taken, I can't remember the exact number, it was $760 billion or some huge dollar amount from Medicare.
Smoke and mirrors. They're pulling money from one program to put it, who knows, we're told where it goes, but who knows really where it goes.
But that is a lot of money to take from these programs that here we've somehow been led to believe that Obamacare was going to take care of so many of the elderly, yet they're stripping the money out of the very program Medicare that the elderly are relying on. How does that work?
Well, what's happening is as the money's pulled out of Medicare, we have our Medicare people that are just not receiving benefits. And on a show I had recently, we had a doctor call in, and he said that he knows of 17 doctors who have left the profession, and he himself is investigating ways that he can leave the profession. And we need our doctors. And I'm really concerned about the war the government is waging on citizens on several fronts. Here we have the war against our retirees, and in a sense a war on our medical system and our doctors, because if we set a medical system in place but we don't have these doctors, what good is it? I would think that we would be doing things that would encourage doctors. They put a lot of money in, they put a lot of time in, and by the time they're really good, not beginners, not novices, having done only 5 or 6 procedures, is a time when they're the most valuable, and often that's the time anymore that we're seeing them leave. And I just think that really needs to be addressed also. So it's many fronts. I have Medicare people telling me today of things that they're having to pay for that they never used to have to pay for. And it was my understanding $500 million was sent over to the IRS to hire the 18,000 new agents also.
It's in my opinion such a convoluted system, such a bureaucratic system that it's got to invite waste. Valuable dollars that could be going to care for people is instead being used to turn the bureaucratic wheels. It's a shame in my mind.
It's my understanding that when these taxes go in, whether it's the Medicare or Social Security, everything goes into the general fund. So we're paying Medicare, all the retirees are paying Medicare premiums, the rest of us are paying Medicare tax or Social Security tax, but it's just going into the general fund, and so it's not being properly appropriated. And to me, this goes down to a systemic problem of the representatives that we elect and hire.
Hey, it looks like we've got Matt Salmon back on the line.
Good. Okay.
So let's give Joe. So Joe's getting that hooked up.
For some reason, it does not go through in a minute. Just call me right back to the studio. I don't know if I'm having a problem on the phone or not. I don't think I am, so I'm going to transfer you right now.
All right, here he comes.
Thank you, sir.
He's praying as he's pushing buttons. I love it. See, this is radio worth watching if we get the cameras on Joe's face right now. Oh, Nancy, this is just priceless if you could see how stressed he is.
I can just imagine.
Relax, Joe. We'll get him on. Joe's going into overload stress, listeners. Anybody that's a praying individual, pray for Joe. We'll get Matt on. In fact, what we'll do is we'll do half the interview. We've run out of some time. We've got time for part of the interview, but I'll certainly invite Matt here in the next day or two, whenever we can link up with his campaign to do the second. He was on hold the whole time? Oh, that's very sad. All right. He's trying one more time to get him transferred over. See, when you do this many upgrades in a couple of month period of time, all right. Is he on? All right, Matt, do I have you now? Okay, we're listening. Matt Salmon, are you on?
Yeah, I'm on.
Hey, I tell you, the problem is that Joe's upgraded his equipment out here so often the last 2 months he can't keep up with which button to push.
Okay.
I'll tell you what's priceless, though, is watching his face as he was stressing it, trying to get you on.
We just got a new phone system. I am so sorry. That was like 100% my fault.
I tell you,
Okay, well,
I tell you what we'll do, though, Matt. We'll do about half the interview now, and then we'll get you on the next day or two to wrap up, because I've got enough questions that I don't think I can crank it out in just a half hour.
okay.
Hey, to start off with, and Nancy, are you with us as well?
I am here. He
Okay.
didn't lose me.
So Matt, what I like to do, it's been a long time, so what I'd like to do is have you introduce yourself to the listeners by telling about why and when you first entered politics. So before we jump into issues of the race of today, let's go back in time and tell us what in the world came into your mind to make you want to enter politics in the first place.
Okay. Would you like me to go ahead and start, or do you want
Tell
you
us
tell me when to start?
Tell us the story. Tell us about why and when you entered politics, Matt.
Well, yeah, I got into politics the very first time in 1989. And I was driving to work, and I was listening to talk radio, and I was getting madder and madder and madder because of the guy that was in the state legislature representing me. And I was thinking, that isn't my views, and I think we can do a better job. And so I got to work, and I called my wife, and I said, I think I'm going to run for the state senate. And she kind of laughed and said, well, that's really nice, sweetheart. And I don't think she took me all that seriously. And I did run and knocked on thousands of doors, and never run for anything before in my life. In fact, nobody in my family had ever run for any political office that I can think of. And so I ran for the state senate against an incumbent state senator, and I won.
Now, was this in Mesa?
And, yeah, that was out in Mesa. So I was elected in 1990 to the state senate, and I served in the state senate for 2 terms. Some of the interesting things that I did while I was there, every year when we have the terrible floods, the news talks about the Stupid Motorist Act. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
That was my bill.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was my bill. I came up with it because a constituent called me, and that year there was on the news this guy that had tried to take his 4-wheel drive through a wash, even though the warning sign said don't enter when flooded.
Right.
And then we had to send in helicopters and relief, and it cost over $100,000 to rescue the guy. And so I introduced this bill called the Stupid Motorist Law that says we ought to have personal consequences when we do stupid things, like bypass signs that say don't enter when flooded, and then have the taxpayers have to bail you out. So it's kind of common with a theme that I pursued all along. I introduced the bill in the state senate called Workfare that required people that were on welfare to give something back to work, to contribute back to our society and not get something for nothing. And that was passed, and it worked out pretty well. And I was a co-sponsor of the charter schools bill. We were one of the first
really?
States. Yeah. In fact, Tom Patterson and myself and a couple other people co-sponsored the bill to create charter schools. We were the first, one of the first states in the country to start the charter school movement, and I was at the forefront of that. And so, those were just some of the things that I was able to do. We cut taxes, we balanced the budget, and we did some good things. And then I ran for Congress, the U.S. House of Representatives in 1994 during the contract with America. And we were promising to go back and do things differently. And I, at that time, promised that I would serve only 3 terms and come home, because the whole idea of career politics was part of the contract with America and stopping career politics. So about 100 of us made our pledge and said that we'd only serve 3 terms and come home across America. And out of the 100 that made that pledge, only 5 of us actually kept our word and came home, and I was one of the 5 that did that.
I do remember that. I do remember that, Matt. And I was pretty surprised, and I was pretty impressed, because once you're in, you'd have probably just kept going. But, yeah, I really admired the fact you kept your word.
So, Matt, are you in favor?
I appreciate that. To me, I have 4 children, and to me it's important to show by example that when you give your word, you keep it. And so, anyway, while I was in Congress, I was one of the budget hawks. And there were about 11 of us that really pushed the envelope to balance the budget. And the New York Times ended up calling us the bad boy Republicans, because we didn't put up with a lot of the Republicans that wanted to, continue increasing spending. And lo and behold, my second term in 1997, we actually balanced the budget, the federal budget, for the first time in 40 years. And and then in 1998, we balanced it again and had a $20 billion surplus. Then in 99, we had over $100 billion surplus. And in 2000, we had a $240 billion surplus. And I'm really proud to have been part of the team that did that. So anyway, then I left, keeping my word, and I've been out of it now for 12 years. And as I've watched our government slide deeper and deeper off into the abyss, and go deeper and deeper into debt, I've become more and more frustrated, thinking all the things that we did, all the hard work we did to balance the budget over 10 years ago, it's all been for naught. And so I decided to get back into the race and run again, and come back and try to take the same stuff I took before to balance the budget and start paying off our debt.
So, Matt, with this time now that you've been gone and looking at going back, has the tone of Washington changed so much and the rules changed so much that we're just on a path that can't be turned around? Because it feels that way at times to many people.
Well, it certainly has changed a lot. The partisan rancor is at an all-time high. It seems like people have forgotten that we're all in this together. We're all Americans. And this federal budget deficit for 3 years straight, the Senate hasn't even passed a budget. 3 years straight.
Isn't that just the saddest? That is such a sad thing.
It's astounding. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, and everyone's pointing fingers at everybody else, but the bottom line is that we keep spending and spending and spending, and when the dust settles, the idea is, well, let's just increase taxes, and some of us, I strongly believe that is the wrong direction. I think
I'm one that believes that. I think that's the last choice. I don't think we have a revenue problem. I think we have a spending problem.
Oh, yeah.
I also believe that it's not, the problem isn't that we don't have enough taxes, it's that we don't have enough taxpayers. And I think that we have to do a better job getting our manufacturers and our jobs from overseas to come back to the United States by having lower corporate tax rates, by having less regulation, and making it so American jobs can compete again.
Well, and regulations are a huge deal. I personally am aware of some of my friends who are getting staff from overseas, partly because of regulations, partly because of taxes, but also partly because of all of the health care mandates and things like that you're stuck with if you get an employee here in the United States.
Well, and the absolute worst thing that we could do, and I've visited over 100 businesses in the last year, and the absolute worst thing that we could do is let this Obamacare stand, because if it does, they're going to have to. It's going to have to be passed on to business. Their costs are going to go through the roof. The deficit is going to continue to grow by at least $500 billion in the next 10 years because of that, and they've already said that they're going to have to cut Medicare by $500 billion in the next 10 years to pay for this Obamacare. It's just foolhardy.
In fact, I was listening today on the way into the show, actually, to an interview with Paul Ryan, and he was talking about Obamacare robbing $760 billion or some number like that from Medicare, and that also is astounding to me that word's not out on the streets greater.
Absolutely. The idea of just kicking the can down the road and not fixing Social Security and Medicare is unconscionable. There are a lot of people that depend on that. We've seen what happened across the ocean in Greece when they didn't tend to their financial issues, and they ended up having to come back at a later point in time and cut a bunch of people off these programs, and there was riots in the streets. And frankly, we can't let that happen in this country. We've got to make sure that we get ahead of the curve, that we fix Social Security, that we fix Medicare, and that we make sure that it's safe and secure for future generations, because what's happening right now is out of sight, out of mind. Let's not talk about it. Let's kick it under the rug. Let's hope that nobody really knows what's going on. And then, once we get it back in office, we'll do what we have to do. Well, I think it's time for some straight talk right now with the American people, that the way we're spending, the out-of-control growth, the borrowing, the raising the debt ceiling, the downgrading of our credit rating by Standard & Poor's, all of these things are pointing to the fact that we've got to get our financial house in order or we are in big trouble.
Now, Matt.
Well, I found the downgrading of our debt to be so embarrassing, and it showed such a lack of responsibility, a lack of just of everything. When you have a warning by Standard & Poor's that says this is what you need to do, this is what you're seeing,
right.
I was just astounded that a group of people who are supposedly knowledgeable in this area couldn't pull it together and do what needed to be done. And I'm sure you agree, I mean, with the huge surpluses that we had at the time that you left office, and to have not only all of those taken and used, and then to see the debt that we're seeing today, I don't even have a word for it. I'm open to any word for that.
It's disgusting. It is something we deserve a lot better, and I think this is the very first time that I can think of, the very first time in American history where a generation is actually looking at leaving a not better America to the next generation, a worse off America. And I think that's terribly wrong. And right now, last year, 43 cents out of every dollar that Washington spent, it was borrowed money.
Oh, that's so
sad.
sad.
Because the credit rating has been now downgraded, we pay a higher interest to borrow that money. So right now, the debt continues to grow and grow and grow, and the debt service is a big part of the federal budget. If it's 43 cents out of every dollar borrowed now, is it going to be 55 cents next year? Is it going to be 65 the next year? And when every dollar that we spend is borrowed, then where are we at?
Right. Yeah, sad stuff.
I agree, and there's a lot of people that don't seem to understand this, or maybe they don't want to understand it. I said earlier that I had somebody posted on Facebook about Social Security isn't out of money, and I'm thinking, what are you talking about? I had recently read where it was IOUs. A lot of people think it's in government bonds, and I came across an article talking about how they just recently printed the IOU, so that if people asked, they could say, "Here's an IOU." And of course, we know that Social Security is spending more than what the taxes are bringing in,
right.
And that's a serious problem. Again, to me, that's a huge breach of confidence, because the program was set up in a certain way and sold to the people in a certain way. But again, as we're seeing today, we have the rhetoric on the one hand, and then we have the actual wording of the law, the opposite often of what the rhetoric is that's told to the American people.
Matt Salmon, I need you to clear up as well.
Anything, go read it.
Matt Salmon, I need you to also clear up for us. There's certainly those advertisements out there, which I hope people don't believe the advertisements. They always get to the truth of things. But there's advertisements out there that you lobbied for Obamacare. Clear that up for all my listeners.
That's a despicable lie. In fact, the company that I used to work for, I never worked one way or the other on the issue. My focus in my practice was on education and defense issues. But one of the guys that worked at the same company actually lobbied against Obamacare, and so my opponent took that information and twisted it 180 degrees the other way. And you know what? I think at the very least, I'd like the voters to realize this: you should never elect somebody to Congress that doesn't know the fundamental difference between for and against. The guy at our firm actually lobbied against Obamacare because it would have bankrupted the two pharmaceutical companies that he was representing that manufacture orphan drugs for cancer patients. The large pharmaceutical companies in the pharma organization, like Pfizer and Glaxo and some of the big guys, they supported Obamacare and they cut a deal. But the small guys that this guy at my firm was representing actually would have been bankrupted by Obamacare, and so he actually lobbied against it. And so I would hope and pray. I know we've shared all this information with my opponent, but he never lets the truth get in the way of a good story.
Well, and again, what I've always done, in fact, I'll tell you this, a couple of years ago, I decided to really check out Harry Reid from Harry Reid's eyes. And I still don't agree with him, but I've uncovered so many things that are said that aren't true about Harry Reid. And again, I fundamentally disagree with him, but
Sure.
but if you're going to find out about a guy, you don't listen to the Republicans telling you about the Democrats, you find out from them, and likewise about candidates. And so I appreciate you clearing that up. What do we replace Obamacare with?
What do we replace it with? We replace it with a free market system. The three things that I would replace Obamacare with, and by the way, I think we have to repeal that immediately. But the three things that I would replace it with: one, I would give every American the same tax deduction that businesses get for health care, the deductions for health care premium costs. That way, it would bring, I think, real competition into the industry. There is no real competition in health care. Look, and my proof is when you watch television, how many commercials for Geico or for Humana or for Blue Cross Blue Shield you see? You don't see any.
Right.
But how many do you see for Geico or for Progressive or for Farmers Insurance, for car insurance? You see a ton, and that's because there's real competition. So if you give every American the same tax deductibility that companies get, and they actually own their policy. So like when you work at a Intel or you work at a Boeing or whatever company you work for, the policy actually belongs to you, not to Boeing. And you get the tax deduction, not Boeing, not Intel. When you go to another job, you take that policy with you. You don't have to pay COBRA. You don't have to worry about pre-existing conditions. You don't have to deal with anything else. That's your policy. You take it with you. The second thing I do would be remove all the restrictions that don't allow us to sell health insurance across state lines. Let the games begin. Let the sales across state lines begin and full-scale competition in healthcare insurance. The third thing is modify the laws as far as the lawyers are concerned and have some lawsuit reform so that we stop having these lawyers make windfalls off of doctors and get some common sense back into the legal system.
Okay.
You mentioned about doctors and the lawsuits, which I agree with. On the show a couple of weeks ago, we had a doctor call in who said that he knows of 17 doctors that have left their practice, and he also plans to leave his. How would your program allow the doctors to stay in practice so that we're not losing these well-established doctors, many of whom are going to be really good at what they do?
If there's real competition in the insurance industries, they're going to stop hosing the doctors, too. My son, and I have a vested interest in all this, my daughter is a registered nurse, and my son is in his, just finished his second year of medical school. So this is up close and personal to me. This isn't just, some problem that's out there in the stratosphere. This is something that's up close and personal to me. And almost all of our doctor friends that are friends of our family tried to talk my son out of going to medical school, saying that you're not even going to recoup your student loans because of the way that they're treating doctors these days and the kind of reimbursements. And so I think that if we have some real competition in the insurance industry, I think that's going to be more helpful for the doctors, too.
What do you think the likelihood is that we'll get it repealed?
Well, I think that if Romney wins and we take the Senate, which means we only have to take 4 seats across the country, and we hold the House, which I think is pretty much a given, Obamacare will be dead and gone within the first month.
What do you think of Paul Ryan's choice?
I think Paul Ryan's approach is it's decent, but I think that it needs to go further in getting rid of some government agencies. I will support the Ryan plan, but I think it doesn't balance for 25 years. The budget doesn't balance for 25 years. I think we can do better than that. Rand Paul has put forth a budget that balances in 3 years. The Republican Study Committee has put forth a budget that balances in 5 years. And I believe that the federal government should only be doing what the Constitution allows it to do, and that's the 20 enumerated powers that they were given in Article 1. And frankly, we've got to go in and put the other things back to the states. There's a lot of things at the federal level that the federal government has no business being involved in. In fact, I think the Federal Department of Education should be done away with.
Amen.
That was one of my first questions because I remember when that
Amen,
that was
Matt.
put in. In fact, that was one I was going to specifically ask you about, so I'm glad you brought it up. I didn't have to ask you.
Yeah, well, so what do we do? I mean, that is such a great battle to fight, the states' right issue on things such as education. I just, and you can comment more on this, I feel like when the federal government starts getting their hands into those types of things, all they do is create a wasteful bureaucracy where they hurt more than they help.
Well, yeah, you figure that out of every dollar they spend for the Federal Department of Education, 43 cents is borrowed. And then they put out these federal guidelines. If you want to get any of your money back for your schools, then you got to jump through all these hoops and the one-size-fits-all approach that the federal government takes to education. Well, I'm here to tell you, what works in New York City doesn't necessarily work in Chandler, Arizona,
right,
or Mesa, or Queen Creek. And so I have more confidence in our local school boards. The Federal Department of Education didn't even come into being until 1979 under Jimmy Carter. And since that time, they've not been successfully audited by the Government Accounting Office one time. They are a squanderer of our resources, and they are not synonymous with good education. And so I think the best thing we can do is keep our money here in Arizona, put it into the classrooms, and not send it to Washington, D.C., where it's going to be squandered on Taj Mahals and one-size-fits-all approaches. And that's one big difference between my opponent and I, because we went to the Arizona Republic editorial board, and he said, well, Matt wants to cut government agencies like the Federal Department of Education, and I don't agree with that. I think we need to keep it, but just reform it. And you know what? There's a fundamental difference between he and I. He called himself an incrementalist. Well, to me, an incrementalist is the same as a middle-of-the-roader. And I don't buy that. I think that we need to go in and we need to cut government. We need to cut what's not constitutional, put the power back to the states, where it is most appropriate, just like Ronald Reagan tried to do, and change the whole dynamic of how we're doing things. Let's get back to the way our founding fathers envisioned we do things. The states are a far better deliverer of government services than the federal government is.
So
you feel it will cost the states less on the schools by getting rid of the federal government
exactly
in the local schools.
Exactly, and have a commensurate reduction in taxes once you get rid of these agencies, so that then if the state if they need to raise taxes, to commensurate with, the tax cuts that have been made at the federal level to pay for that government, that's their decision to do, and the people that live in those states.
Yeah, there's so many other bureaucracies like that as well, so many agencies.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you what, Matt.
There's three agencies right away that I would get rid of. One is the Federal Department of Education, one is the Federal Department of Commerce, and one is the Federal Department of Energy. And I think that those three agencies, there are so many other, so much duplication of resources and power that go across these agencies that business is having to do more with less. They're having to cut out whole levels of management. They're having to cut out programs. They're having to do more with less. Why shouldn't the federal government do the same thing?
Yeah, exactly. Well, amen. I'm with you on that one.
The federal government, what's your position on the federal government's interference with the efforts of border states like Arizona attempting to protect the borders of Napolitano, saying that yes, some terrorists have crossed our borders and seemingly not concerned about it. What's your position on that?
The U.S. Supreme Court said that Arizona had every right to, when they pull somebody over for another infraction, they have every right to determine whether that person is in our state legally. And I support 1070 100%. The only reason that 1070 ever came to be was because the federal government is not doing its job. And when I ran against Janet Napolitano for governor about 8 years ago, in our third debate, she looked into the camera and she said, Matt Salmon is such a right-wing extremist. He voted to put our troops on the Mexican border. And that's true. I did. But then 1 year later, when she became governor, she put the National Guard on the border.
Yes.
What a difference a day makes.
Exactly.
But I will tell you that I think that if we would have our troops actually doing their exercises and their training on the borders, we would make sure that all of these bad things that are happening at the borders that are being done by the drug cartels, human smuggling, drug trafficking, gun running, and terrorists being smuggled across the borders will stop.
So, Matt, there's a list of other things that I'm interested in, and my listeners are interested in, that we just don't have time today because of the phone challenges that Joe has had with his new system. So I'm going to have Linda get a hold of your campaign assistance and see what we can do to get you on the next day or two, because voting has started. So we've got to get the word out as to what you stand for. And so hopefully in the next day or two we have you back on for another half hour or so
Okay.
to talk a little bit about some abortion issues, marriage issues, energy independence issues, more on the immigration. One of the things you can ponder, I'm going to ask you hard questions about what do we do about those illegal aliens that are already here. That's a hard question.
I like what Romney said. If we have a strong E-Verify program within all the states, then these people are going to self-deport. If they can't get jobs, they're going to go back to Mexico. I mean, that's a fact.
Well, we saw that some in Arizona, didn't we? We saw that.
Exactly. That's what's happening because of 1070. But if we do that across the country, that's what's going to happen. That's what Romney has been saying as he's running for president, that if we have a strong E-Verify system so that no illegal aliens can be hired by U.S. employers at all, then they're going to self-deport and go back to Mexico, and then they're going to have to do it the right way.
Well, Matt Salmon, you've been a wonderful guest. Again, I apologize that we started a little bit late. Nancy Fleming, I appreciate you joining, and we'll also be playing this, Matt, on the Money and Motivation show tonight at 6:15. We'll replay this interview, and then we'll get together the next day or two.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Thank you, Matt. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks, Nancy.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Nancy. All right, listeners, we appreciate you joining us on this special edition of the Mark Winsor Show. Stay tuned. In about 9 minutes, we have the Winsor and Diller Show and some wonderful information. This is definitely radio worth watching. God bless you.
Our family pets are such a big part of our lives. That's
All right,
why
once we got 'em
Kelly's
on that
Critter
one, well.
Clips of Queen Creek and Sun Lakes has been providing pet grooming services for over 10 years. Your dog's comfort is